Welcome back, and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective. So I've got a great show today. We're going to talk about how well you're measuring and attributing performance to your media spend. Odds are you've got a dashboard for a channel, but are you measuring across all channels with the right tools or simply succeeding against your personal or team goals? There's a big difference. So do you truly understand the fundamentals of attribution, especially with how your TV spend is doing versus digital, or with how the organization, or better yet, customers look at you? Jeff Greefield is the co-founder and chief attribution officer, a new title, of C3 Metrics, and he's a subject matter expert at Attribution and Performance Media. And on this episode, we'll discuss the need for more attribution, looking at multi-touch, and getting out of your silos, addressable targeting and addressable TV, and how you as a marketer can get certified, and much more. So join us now and let's tune in to a Chief Attribution Officer with a Chief Shark Officer on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective. If you could tell us a little bit about your background and your career to date.
Sure, Kenneth. And thank you so much for having me on today. I currently am the Chief Attribution Officer, which is a brand new title.
I love that title.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's where I'm actually the first Chief Attribution Officer in the world, and as one of the co-founders here at C3 Metrics, we've kind of push the way forward for brands, marketers, to really look to see how there's this convergence of marketing, technology, and finance. And that's really where this Chief Attribution Officer sits. I co-founded C3 Metrics about 10 years ago with the other founder, Mark Hughes. Mark and I have been working together since 2001. Prior to that, I worked in the branded entertainment and product placement space. So I used to put things on TV and in film, and now I'm in the business of measuring the effectiveness of stuff that's on TV and film and in the digital realm as well. So it's been an exciting kind of path so far.
Yeah. So a big chunk of my career has been focused on attribution as well, especially in the TV space. And I often speak about the value of attribution, both digital and TV at conferences. So anytime I get the chance to hear another thought leader talk about this subject, then I absolutely jump at the chance. And at the TV of Tomorrow show in San Francisco event where we both spoke, I had the pleasure of hearing you do a session specifically on attribution. So a couple of questions here. One, why the focus on attribution? Two, why at a TV conference? And three, how many Red Bulls did you have? Because you brought a lot of energy to the stage, and the passion was really flowing through on this whole subject.
Well, thanks a lot, Kenneth. It's for me, it's usually not Red Bulls. It's typically martinis, gin martinis to be specific. But this is something that's is I'm very passionate about because it's really exciting. And the reason for attribution is because without accurate measurement, we're not going to have the growth that we need to have in the advertising space. I mean, the key is at the end of the day, marketers, we like shiny objects. We like trying really exciting new stuff, and we're willing to do anything. But if I can't demonstrate and prove that the thing I did led to revenue, I'm not going to get more money to do it again. And we see that a lot. We see that whenever new stuff comes out, and in the digital era, we've seen all sorts of new things come about. And that's why so much money moved into digital, because there was this inherent built-in measurement.
Absolutely.
Meaning, it had clicks, it had impressions, had all those things. So people jumped in like crazy. But now we're starting to find that all these different things that people did, they're starting to realize that it's tough to really draw a straight line or even a jagged line directly to revenue. So attribution is important because it's what provides us as marketers what we need in order to do more of stuff that actually works.
Yeah, let me jump in here and add one thing that you said that just resonated in my mind, and it went back to conversations I had with friends at the show and also on my panel. One of the greatest gifts that Google ever gave the digital marketing world was Google Analytics. So it gave you that clean line of last click attribution for them, clean anyway, but it was a very smart tool that they put in, and I've so often found that there has been such a need for some similar, type of thing. But you're never going to get this to happen because you can't have the publishers are never going to agree because they're all competing for the dollars. But Google owns 90% of the industry, so their only real afterthought, if you will, is Bing. But I mean, when you equate it to that alone, it strikes a chord with me. So why did you choose to do this at the TV show?
Well, because TV is still a large part of the market. I mean, TV is shrinking dramatically and pretty rapidly. And the reason for that is because a lot of TV buyers have shifted dollars over to digital. And TV is still it's still I hate to say it, but it's still an old person's game. It really is. They just haven't woken up to the fact that they're losing, and they've got another couple of years, or they're going to go the way of print. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Now, the exciting thing about TV is this concept of addressable television, which means that essentially TV is going to be the same as digital. It's going to be a one-to-one relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're sitting on a street and everybody's watching Wheel of Fortune, and it's a commercial break, everyone is going to actually get a different commercial based upon their demographic and economic scenario. Somebody who is a Ford F-150 driver may see an ad for Fords if their lease is about to expire, and somebody else may see an ad for Audi. I mean, that's really, really exciting. The problem, though, right now is they all have their walls up. Nobody's talking to each other.
Absolutely.
And none of them have built-in inherent independent attribution. And that's the problem, is that when they put the walls up, it makes measurement almost impossible, which means, again, I go back to what I said. I'm a marketer. I'll try it. It's shiny. It's new. But I can't draw a line from that to my revenue, so I'm not going to get more money from finance to do it. Can't prove it works, so I'm not going to do more of it. That's why we're talking at the TV of Tomorrow show and other TV conferences. Also because we find that overall there's a lack of information, basic information about what attribution is. Everyone's talking about it.
Yeah.
No one really understands it. And it's an interesting history to see how Google acquired a company, adapted it, built it out, and the way that they continue to have a stranglehold on the industry when it comes to analytics and attribution is that what they actually went out and did, which is genius, is they created curriculum, college-level curriculum, and have gone to all of the colleges, given it to college professors, and now Google Analytics is being taught in colleges. So they have started a whole, they've pre-sold it in to college students, so when college students graduate, they already know GA, they're not going to go anywhere else. It's just a smart, it's a smart strategy for conquering the world from an advertising perspective.
Sure.
It's ingenious.
Well, I know you had to travel some, but what were your thoughts on the TV of Tomorrow show as a whole, at least as far as the climate and conversation and what you're hearing and seeing at other TV conferences today?
What I'm hearing and seeing is that TV has to move faster.
Yeah.
It has to move a lot faster. And the problem with TV is that the majority of television is still owned and operated by large corporations that have been around for years that move incredibly slow. Now, what a lot of them have done is they've acquired companies or they've hired people that like to move fast. But I've seen this happen before, and although the teams want to move very quickly, corporations only move as fast as they're going to move. So the climate is, wow, we need things to be 2 or 3 years ahead of where it is right now. And they keep saying, yeah, it's going to get there, it's going to get there. But you just look at the trend in terms of the growth and the movement, and it's incredibly slow. This really would have been, I'm very excited about what Xandr and AT&T has to offer, and it would have been really exciting if it had been ready for this Q4. It's not going to quite be there, and we hope it'll be there next year for Q4 for shopping. We'll see.
Very much. I agree. So what are your thoughts, though? I talk about this frequently, about how the people that are buying the media and shifting these dollars are still shifting a lot of it towards video, but a lot of that video is connected, and it's still in the TV form, if you will, just more on a connected device, and it's more addressable, as you said, more that one-to-one relationship where you at least can click it and track it. But it's not the set-top box world that so much of us have grown up in.
Well, Google and the other providers online, and when you talk about video, when you talk about addressable video or digital video, they've sold in the argument that YouTube is just like TV.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to hold out YouTube, but they are the predominant video source online. But Facebook is doing the same argument.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is that the viewing habits of YouTube watchers and Facebook watchers and Instagram watchers is substantially different than a home TV watcher.
Absolutely.
We all know that. The ability to absorb a marketing message is completely different. When you're sitting at home and you're vegging in front of the TV in an easy chair or on bed, this is a passive type of behavior where you're relaxing. The video that is watched online is an active behavior. We all know that the brain is more open to suggestion when the viewer is in a passive type behavior versus an active type behavior. So right there, the ability to influence individuals with advertising is substantially different. Doesn't mean it doesn't work. It actually works incredibly well, but it's just important to address that. The other big difference is the idea of reach. Reach is much more substantial still in the TV market versus the addressable video market currently.
Yeah. So in your opinion, what does the average marketer and advertiser need to know and understand about attribution?
Well, what they need to know and understand is that, first off, looking at data through a silo, looking at just one channel, meaning looking at the results of TV on its own or looking at the results of Facebook on its own is a complete falsehood.
Absolutely.
It's a complete warped, skewed perception of reality. So we need to stop relying upon analytics and reports that you get from different vendors or different channels because it's only going to point you in the wrong direction. That's the first thing. The second thing is that consumers who come in through TV don't just stay in TV. Very few people see a TV spot and say, oh my God, I got to go buy a Chevy and get in their car and drive to Chevy. The consumer of today is a multi-channel consumer. They interact, they flow in between digital, print, TV, radio. They go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth constantly. And so as a result, if you're just looking at a single channel view, it's not going to point you in the right direction. So you have to look at a way where you're able to merge things together. Now, the only way to do that and to do that effectively is to use multi-touch attribution. And that's the beauty about the world that we live in today is that the one center point that you have through this entire consumer journey is the digital trail. By utilizing that digital trail, you're able to then both deterministically and probabilistically link all other forms of traditional media, including television, and have a more accurate view. Now, when I say more accurate, the goal with attribution is that to be less wrong today than you were yesterday in terms about where to spend your next marketing dollar. Because no one has the absolute truth, but the key is that can you be less wrong? The idea is that all models and all modeling is actually wrong because it's never 100% accurate. But if you can look as a goal to say, okay, I know I'm wrong today. If I can be less wrong tomorrow and less wrong the next day and move towards a better scenario, then you're in great shape. And that's really the key with attribution.
So what do you think? I know where the average level of understanding is with most junior marketers, but those are the ones running the day-to-day campaigns. I say junior, not people without 20 years of experience are generally the ones running the day-to-day campaigns. And there's some very smart marketers, but that's typically the level of person that's running a campaign. Your decision makers, your CMOs and senior directors and so forth that are the key decision makers within these large companies. What do you think they know and don't know today about attribution. There is a very big difference between what the day-to-day person knows and understands versus the senior level executive.
You're absolutely right. And what's also important is that each of them has a different set of motivations in terms of what they're looking to accomplish.
Agreed.
You know, senior level decision makers are worried about building a kingdom. They're worried about their career, and some of them, luckily, are worried about the company as a whole,
Mm-hmm.
and the continued growth of the company. So the, those senior level decision makers, um, they tend to rely a lot on their team's expertise in terms of driving decisions. They leave a lot of the decisions, and sometimes they leave too many of those decisions to people that are on their team. The marketer of today, the senior level decision makers, you know, it used to be that our job was to be creative. We were the ones that were sitting down creating the profile of the customer.
Right.
Our customer is Tina. She is 25 years old. She lives in an apartment and has two roommates and has a cat named Tom. She is, she graduated college with this type of degree. And then they build profiles and messaging off of that. That's the way things used to be. Now, today, these senior level decision makers are supposed to be data driven marketers, meaning understanding data in order to make those decisions. What I've found, though, is that the vast majority of these data driven marketers, they tend to rely upon the more junior people to collect and collate the data and select which tools they actually utilize in order to collect and collate the data. So they put off a lot of the responsibilities, because when you're talking about data, what's important about the data that you're using to make decisions is, where does it come from?
Mm-hmm.
Is it actually, is there a lot of false data in there? And that's one of the big differences between marketing mix and multi-touch that a lot of these senior level decision makers don't understand. They assume that when they see a final report that it's actually accurate. And the problem with attribution is, since you start at this user level and you move your way on up, that if half the data is fraudulent, because there is a lot of fraud in digital data,
yeah,
and it hasn't been filtered out, then the report looks the same as a marketing mix, and you're going to make decisions based upon it, but they could be the complete opposite. Now, I'll give you an example of that. In the digital world, there are things that are called like spiders and bots.
right. Yep.
And there's a list that buyers and sellers subscribe to, like the IAB's list or tags, data center list, that everyone agrees these are bad actors, and these bad actors are things that don't constitute real human beings. And all of this stuff should be filtered out of our reports, so that when we look at final reports, that this data will be excluded from that. 90 to 95% of measurement companies out there, and attribution companies would be included in this, don't even subscribe to those lists.
Yeah.
So right there, you already know that the error rate in some of this decision making is massive. You've got attribution companies out there right now on the digital side that are saying, hey, we don't need viewability data. We don't need to know whether the ad was seen or not. Our models are so sophisticated, machine learning can see through that. And it's like, that argument would hold true on a media mix model, but not when you're at a user level. It doesn't hold true at all. It's complete BS. So that's one of the problems, is that these senior level folks, they get these reports and they're basing decisions based upon that, but they're not digging into the details of it. My feeling always is that if you're making decisions, and those decisions are going to impact your career, your budget, your company, you need to make 1,000% certain that the data that it's relied upon has been fully checked, and the validity of it.
Mm-hmm.
And most of them don't understand those fundamentals in order to get there, and that's one of the problems.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And when you said a couple of times during this already about silos, that just really keys in for me. Another burning point is that we don't focus enough of this on the customer. So every independent silo that we create with our teams, with our media mix, with everything else. Once it all boils down to the customer, it's a complete mess, and no surprise that they don't react well to, branded and marketing messaging, because so much of it is just babble that isn't unified. At least, I mean, it doesn't make sense to me that even a company wouldn't have a unified front with their messaging. It never makes sense at all. So when you look at it though today, what do you think we're doing right in attribution today, and what do you think we're doing wrong? I mean, well, let me back that up, because you've already kind of told us what we're doing wrong. What do you think at least that we are doing right today in attribution?
Well, let me add on one other thing that we're doing
Sure.
wrong. One other thing, and I don't think that we're doing it wrong, but I think it's just a natural growth phase of what's happening in the industry.
Sure.
One thing that's wrong right now is that there's no standards that are in place.
Absolutely.
And so as a result, we've got a multitude of attribution companies. And the last two examples I gave about the robots and spiders, the data center list, and viewability, there's nobody there that's dictating, that's saying, hey, you got to do these things, because this is just basic foundation. So I think that since we're doing that type of stuff with in the absence of standards, marketers are left to question results. And what I'm not saying that everyone needs to use the same formulas, because that's somebody's secret sauce. That's totally cool. But the basic inputs, everyone needs to agree on what those standards are, so it can build up confidence. So that's one thing that's being done wrong, which I think in 2020 and 2021, as a natural evolution, we're going to see standards come in, and we're going to see a massive surge in growth in this industry and in confidence placed into it because of the foundation that's been set. In terms of what we're doing right, is we've got some of the brightest minds, both in marketing, computer science, and data science, that are digging in, solving these problems. And they're solving it in really innovative ways. They're looking at it and they're being able to say, hey, I may not have every single little data set, but with machine learning, I can get to a less wrong answer. And so what's cool now is that even though you've got a lot of walled gardens, some open up, some gates, some don't, you can still, because of using proxy measurements and others, you can still go in and get a very close, pretty accurate measurement that provides marketers what they need and want, which is, I don't want a study that tells me how it did, because that's great like 20 years ago. What I need is, I need a dashboard, like a Bloomberg terminal, that is showing me in real time how things are progressing. I mean, not necessarily real time, but at least day to day, how my campaigns are doing, what is the ROI of each tactic at a very granular level, and I need to be able to track it, because we live in this very dynamic world where it's all a bid-ask type system. So I could set it and forget it in terms of a digital campaign, and even in terms of a TV campaign, and expect that it should be fine for the next 3 months. But I could turn around next week and find out I've been outbid and I'm not showing up anywhere anymore. So that's what we're doing right, is that everyone is focused on providing that to the marketer, because one of the things we know is that marketing is only getting more complicated. There's only going to be more inputs that come in, and we need to be able to provide them with that type of Bloomberg terminal.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I reflect on whether or not TV is really competing against some sort of digital millennial transformation in how we consume everything, or is it simply competing against GA and what GA does so fantastically well that we can see at a moment's notice and pivot on, and that just drives so much of where we spend. So,
well, don't forget, Kenneth, that all of the incremental growth over the last 24 months in marketing expenditure, if you go back 2 years ago and you look at overall the extra money that's gone into advertising, 80 to 90% of those dollars have gone to both Google and Facebook.
Absolutely.
Nowhere else.
Yeah.
So the enemy, the enemies are no longer, it's no longer A&E against ABC.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's Google and Facebook. And what sucks for these folks is that, you go back 10 years ago when digital was starting to grow, and it's these local markets and the local salespeople that actually started selling Google and Facebook and whatever else was new. So they enabled it. And that's the scary thing, is that you got to be very careful. It's kind of like CPG companies. CPG companies were like, hey, what's this new thing, Amazon? This is pretty cool. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to ship you all my Tide products and everything like that. You guys can start selling it. I'm not worried about it. This becomes a new channel. And literally overnight, that new channel ends up becoming a major channel. And then all of a sudden, they create their own channel, and now they're competing against you because you don't have, in the case of CPG, a direct relationship with your customer, and they do. And you helped enable that. And it's like, this is the problem with brands and with publishers, is that you have to be very, very careful because of the digital enablement of commerce, things are moving. The timeline for business is moving at light speed. It used to be in the old days of digital. I remember saying that a week in the internet was the equivalent of like several months in the retail world. And I would say that still is true. It's kind of like a Moore's law for digital growth and digital enablement. And a lot of companies, and that's what we saw at the TVOT show, and a lot of the TV shows, is that these folks are still, to this day, playing catch up. And there was a period of time where they were sitting on lots of cash, where they
Not
could have
anymore,
gobbled up
yeah.
a lot of these companies.
Yeah.
They could have made acquisitions. And you sit back now and you look at how much cash Facebook and Google are sitting on right now.
Oh,
And
yeah.
now they're in a position, in Amazon as well, where they can control their own future. And right now, for TV networks, I hate to say it, but the most valuable asset they have these days is actually their real estate holdings.
Yeah, I agree. So I read a post of yours not that long ago in LinkedIn, which was a note to CMOs. Don't accept a media plan 100% based on granular targeting. You will not hit your number, and the increased costs will kill your ROI and your jobs. Brands do need to be focused on targeting, but never forget reach. So when I read that, coming from especially the addressable world, that gave me pause. But I get your point, and I understand it further. But are you worried that brands are focusing too much on targeting? Is that your stance, sort of in the targeting versus reach?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I know McKinsey has done a lot of studies that talk about there's no longer a consumer funnel. It's this crazy circular pattern, which I think confuses marketers
Mm-hmm.
because they miss the whole concept. The greatest thing about, the consumer funnel, AIDA, awareness, interest, desire, action, is that in order for someone to come out as a customer or make a purchase, they got to start at the top of the funnel, and you got to go wide, which means your reach has to be wide. When you target, you're cutting down your reach substantially. And what we've seen this, a great example is what we saw happen in the local auto market about 2 years ago. Actually, 2.5 years ago now, we saw local auto dealers. Now, local auto dealers, they comprise about 80% of the traditional media markets, TV, radio, and print. We saw them, and prior to that, they had already started spending some dollars on digital, but about 2.5 years ago, they started weaning themselves off of TV, print, and radio. And most of them became exclusive digital marketers. So what does that do? Because, the reality is that, I drive by my local Chevy dealership every single day, but I'm not in market, so I don't notice it. And the auto journey is a very long journey. It's 8 to 9 months in the
Mm-hmm.
U.S. for a new car purchase, because that's when most Americans who lease cars, they get that pull ahead notice. Hey, I'm a Chevy driver, and they let me know that I can get a better deal right now. Because what they're worried about is that if I get to my lease expiration, that I may decide to upgrade to an Audi or something like that. So all of a sudden I'm in market. So all of a sudden I start to notice car dealership signs. I start to look around. And what TV does, what radio does, And what print does with the reach that they have is when I become in market, it grabs my attention. It really grabs me in. And what they did is they shut that off. And when I started talking with local dealers about 2 years ago, I asked them how business was, and they told me they didn't answer my question. They told me profits were up. And I'm like, profits are up? What do you mean? Yeah, I found that digital is a lot less expensive than TV and radio. So I pulled on my TV and radio, and I was able to take half of it and put it in digital, and I'm getting the same clicks. Everything's looking great and everything like that. And the rest became profit. I said, wow, that's great. How are sales? Well, they're about the same as last year, meaning sales were flat. But remember, this is an 8-month journey. So if I cut off TV, radio, and print today, I'm not going to notice it because that's upper funnel. I'm not going to notice it till 8 months later. And it was about 8 to 12 months later that a lot of dealers started seeing sales slide. And they fell down off a cliff big time. Mm-hmm. They tried all sorts of other things in digital. And now you'll start to notice, if you watch your local Comcast or any local TV, you listen to your local streaming radio, or you look in print locally, all of a sudden you're going to start to see more and more auto ads because they're back to filling the top of their funnel. Mm-hmm. They're back to tactics that drive reach. It's exactly the same thing that P&G learned. P&G was one of the biggest purchasers of digital media. And they moved tons of money over to digital. And then they started to realize, how many of these people that we're exposed to are actually people, and how many are actually bots and fraud. Mark Pritchard, they did some studies, and his belief was that 75 cents of every dollar that he was spending on digital, 75 cents of every dollar was actually going to bots. So they started pulling more and more digital off, and guess where they've returned now? They're back in radio. In fact, they're one of the largest buyers of network radio today. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, but I mean, when you think about granular targeting, especially addressable, you can, for lack of a better phrase, pepper in through, different types of audience propensity models, different levels of people that you can add to your audience. Maybe kind of stay with a car analogy, somebody at the highest rank, has a 10-year-old car and needs another one. Number two, you could add in something to expand that audience. Maybe they bought them within the last 5 years or so. I'm bringing up bad analogies, but you can lower from an optimal to a somewhat less than optimal and still get a decent reach, even on addressable targeting.
You can, but for large brands, it's still tough today from an addressable perspective to get the kind of scale that you need, number one. Number two, what's also important to realize is that the more you target, the more expensive things are on a CPM basis. Yeah. So that's the other thing is that, we've had clients that we've layered in data for very, very extensive targeting where you've looked at competitive data where, clients or give me targets of customers who have shopped with my competitor in the last year but haven't been there in the last 90 days. So sometimes that can double and triple the cost of your media buy. Yeah. And unless you're utilizing attribution, you're not actually going to know what your true ROI is.
Oh, absolutely.
You may find with the targeting that you're actually doing great in terms of sales, but it's not profitable for you. And that's another issue is that with attribution done accurately, you can actually go in and figure out what is your actual profit. Should I actually be doing this? Am I bankrupting the company by doing this really cool targeting? And that's one of the other issues is that, again, targeting becomes another shiny object that the marketer wants to try. And it's all the rage, but the problem is it actually doing what it needs to be doing? Am I actually making money, or by doing so much targeting, am I actually losing money?
Agreed. Well, let's transition then to your certification program. I know that there are tons of courses out there that exist in the knowledge world and learning different types of marketing and advertising tactics. Influencers have a lot of courses, online courses, but, I don't know until I met, one of your peers from your company. I don't know that I'd ever seen one focused on attribution. So I took a look at it at attribution, the whole course navigation set up with a lot of the definitions, the types, the history, the fundamentals quiz, and all those kind of things. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was so needed because it's something I often preach about, but I love the fact that somebody had a certification course on this. Talk about the impetus for creating an online course around attribution and what you sort of seen it do for different departments.
Well, I'm so excited to hear you say that, Kenneth. That means a lot to us. I mean, what started this for us is, you know, I mean, part of attribution and one of the hardest parts with attribution is driving the adoption within the organization. In fact, that's all the studies now are showing that most corporations are spending in the hundreds of millions of billions of dollars for them to leverage their data, but they haven't addressed the human side of the equation, which is the understanding and the fundamentals and the why behind their doing this. And what we found is that we could come in because an organization says they want attribution, the CMO says they need it. We would come in and train the entire team on it. They would get all excited. And then all of a sudden, there'd be a staff change. Somebody new would come in who had never used attribution.
Right.
And all they had ever done was last click. They were unfamiliar with it. And people don't like things that they're unfamiliar with. And then what we would see is slowly but surely all the work we had done, just because of one new person, everything would start to go backwards very quickly. And we found that what there was a lot of is that, and this is across the board in ad technology, there's a lot of courses out there that train the user on how to use the platform, which is great. You know, there's a training program for Google Analytics, there's a training program for DataZoo, for MediaMath, but there's very few training programs that talk about what are DSPs, what do they do, and why do I need it? That is not advertising for that DSP. And we found for attribution, there was no foundational knowledge base available for anyone that wanted and needed to get that foundation. We also found that everyone says they understand what attribution is, but when you dig into the details, we find out that there's a lot of misunderstanding and a lot of confusion. And so we sought out to create an online learning course that would provide individuals with the foundation that they need and do it in such a way that that's agnostic. I mean, that's why we set it up at attributioncertification.com. It's essentially our way of giving back to the industry. We know that attribution is growing, but we also know that more people need to have a foundational understanding of it in order to really push the industry forward. That's why that was the impetus behind creating the course. We've set some very aggressive goals in terms of certifying several thousand people this year. We're on track to do it, which is pretty incredible. And we've devoted a significant number of resources, both in time and energy, and an entire team strictly devoted to getting folks certified. Because the more they understand about the fundamentals of attribution, they'll be able to speak to their organization, to their clients, to their team about the importance for it, and it'll help guide them towards better decision making. Better decision making is going to lead towards higher budgets, and that raises the bar for everyone in the industry.
Such a great point on addressing the human part of it as well, because it's just like digital transformation. All the tools, all that stuff, we get plenty of learnings for. You can find 99% of it, but organizations do not focus enough human value on helping somebody understand why attribution is important, getting their buy-in, and everything else. I mean, the marketing part of it, it's the easy part, you know. I applaud you for doing it. So, Jeff, so you're in New Hampshire, sandwiched in between Massachusetts and Maine. You've got some great whites off that beautiful harbor. You're talking to a shark's perspective. I have to ask you, what is your favorite kind of shark and why?
Oh, well, obviously it'd be the great white shark. Just because, I mean, they're the biggest predators. Besides the whale shark, obviously, but the great white, I've just, being so near Cape Cod.
Yeah.
One of my favorite movies of all time is Jaws.
Absolutely.
So without a doubt, it's got to be the great white. And what's fascinating is over the years we've learned so much about the great whites. Back in the past we saw them as these massive predators, that we should be terrified of. And now what we're realizing is that they're not as bad and as mean as we thought they were.
No, I've been in the water with quite a few of them, and they are beautiful, fairly docile creatures. You just got to respect where their territory is. So, well, Jeff, it's that special time in the show. Are you ready for the 5 most interesting and important questions you're going to be asked today?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't wait for it, Kenneth.
All right, here we go. Marketing and advertising via digital channels or marketing and advertising via TV?
Wow, if I had to pick one, you mean?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a tough one.
Sophie's
it really
choice.
Yeah, it's really tough. At the end of the day, that's a question that a lot of clients of ours face every day. And what's funny is that when you have a client that has 2 agencies, a digital and a TV agency, the digital agency would freak out if they turned off TV because they know TV impacts digital substantially. TV drives to the web.
Yep.
And digital is how people search and learn about things and research things. So, my God, I'm still at the end of the day, I'm a huge TV fan, and I'm long on TV. I think the future for TV is just huge and massive. I mean, I got to go with TV.
Yeah, I would agree. You just got to get people off the couch per your earlier explanation of it. So, number 2, wet martini versus dry martini.
Well, it's got to be very dry, I mean very, very dry, and it's got to be gin, and it's got to be stirred, not shaken. And I like it. If it's going to be, you can do very, very dry, meaning no vermouth, or you can do an in and out where you pour the vermouth in the glass and then shake the rest out of it. And the best way to have a martini like that, if you really want to go classic, is you don't even stir it, you don't shake it. You take your gin and you keep it in the freezer. And then you pour it out and it comes out like heavy almost. And that's perfect. You just pour it out and you take a little lemon twist on it. And that's all you need. If it's good gin, it's got to be really good gin though.
That's not bad. So, number 3, addressable TV or connected TV?
Oh, definitely addressable TV. Addressable TV is the absolute future. It's absolutely incredible. And like right now, I think one of the biggest growth markets that we're going to see in Q4, just to add to this, is going to be Roku. Roku is this incredible convergence right now between digital and TV. The fact that you can take a small retargeting tag and stick it on your website and then bid people up and have your TV ads shown on Roku devices. With the growth in Roku is going to be absolutely positively incredible. Really long on Roku, and that convergence is incredible.
All right, number 4, lobster roll or New England clam chowder?
Definitely lobster roll, but not the traditional lobster roll. I'm not a big mayonnaise fan.
No.
There is a restaurant that we have here in Portsmouth called Row 34. Those of you who spend time in Boston also know there's a Row 34 in Boston in the Seaport. Only 2 locations, incredible food. They do a hot buttered lobster roll, which is absolutely positively incredible. Now, my wife tells me that I like it not because of the lobster, but because it's almost like a grilled cheese sandwich that's really thick bread and made with tons of butter. But I'll go with the hot buttered lobster roll any day of the week at Row 34. Definitely the place to go.
Not bad. Number 5, and the most important question that you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread?
Wow. I would definitely have to go with biscuits, but biscuits from one specific restaurant. I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida.
Oh, good. I knew there was a southern part of you there.
Yeah, and in Jacksonville, there's a famous restaurant called Famous Amos, having nothing to do with the cookies.
Yeah,
there's probably about 9 locations, and they have the absolute best biscuits you'll ever have. In fact, when you go in to eat, doesn't matter what else you order. It's only an excuse so that you can order biscuits. If you're like me, you can finish a whole basket of them. And it's still one of the best places in the world because when you go in there, the waitresses will still call you hun. It's just it's the perfect example of Southern charm in terms of a restaurant. But unbelievable biscuits, blow away any cornbread. Absolutely.
Well, Jeff, where can people find out more about you, follow your thought leadership, learn more about the certification and more?
You can always go to c3metrics.com to get just generalized information. For certification, you can go to attributioncertification.com or just connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always available on LinkedIn and always look forward to chatting with folks.
Outstanding. Jeff, thank you so much for being with us today on A Shark's Perspective.
Thank you, Kenneth. It's been a blast.
So that was my conversation with Jeff Greefield, the co-founder and chief attribution officer of C3 Metrics, and he's a subject matter expert at attribution in media. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from my conversation with him. First, one of my favorite quotes in my own presentations at conferences comes from American merchant and marketing pioneer John Wanamaker, who once said, "Half the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The trouble is I don't know which half." 100 years ago, that may have been considered okay, but now it's just an out-of-work CMO who wasted too much money not knowing where he spent it. So there's no excuse for us as marketers to at least appreciate what attribution means to business leaders who give us money to invest in something in a business. Not everything is attributable, but if you want or need more money, for example, in order to invest further in your endeavor, then most often it needs to be justified with how it's been performing. And as Jeff said, and I quote, "The reason for attribution is because without accurate measurement, we're not going to have the growth we need in advertising space." So yes, we do have to walk a fine line with things that may help a customer that cannot be measured. But at least with advertising, especially anything that's clickable, you should always attempt to attribute your marketing spend. You already do this with so many other tools, just like GA. Second, we live in too many silos and sadly isolated, even only somewhat isolated, departments still look at attribution and performance through a single source and channel, and that is wrong. Consumers are looking at you through multiple touch points and multiple channels. You have to look at the multiple touches you get on all channels in order to measure this correctly. Focus on your data also, so important. As Jeff points out to the CMO, a bad attribution report looks the same as a marketing mix, and that CMO may put too much money into the wrong bucket because you've measured one or more channels in silos. So don't do that. Third, Jeff brings up a great point in addressing the human side of the equation for attribution, which is part of that buy-in that's so hard to get. Leaders change all the time, and a new wave of people comes into an organization. Tools change with new ones being introduced every day. However, the fundamentals for attribution and the importance of it to an organization won't and shouldn't change. A business will always need to understand how their media spend is performing, so at least keep that focus. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you for the privilege of your time. Invest in yourself and you'll always be able to attribute success to that investment. So consider getting certified and join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.